Why did he behave like that? By Mark Spruce. Written in April 2026. Our parents, Mum and Dad. Why did they have the characteristics they had? Why did they get so upset about some things? How did their own red lines get drawn? No doubt they, like us, were formed as a mixture of nature and nurture. The influences and beliefs of their own parents, the environment they grew up in, and the things that happened to them in their formative years all went towards making them the people they became when it was their turn to become parents themselves. At some point in our lives, as we mature ourselves, this obvious fact begins to dawn on us. We begin to see them as actual people and not just parents. Not just the ones who set the rules, not just the ones who sometimes frustrated us with what we believed at the time to be their unreasonable behaviour. I guess some of these realisations have come to me at different points in my life as I've got older and hopefully matured. One bit of knowledge and realisation came to me only recently, and it's what prompted me to write all this down while it was still in my mind. The story relates to my father, Tom Spruce. But it really is a universal theme that many of us can apply with reflection and understanding. Tom Spruce was born in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1919. He was 42 when I came along and 60 by the time I reached 18. It was more or less a double generation gap. That in itself is likely to have caused an extra degree of dislocation and misunderstanding. What I can remember is that there was so little in my teenage life that he could relate to. There were a few things that stand out back then that I used to find inexplicable, annoying and frustrating. My number one was Dad, in my mind, was obsessed by the clock. Mealtimes, for instance. Breakfast, 7:30. Lunch, 12:30. Tea, 5:30. Why the hell did it matter if it was a bit early or a bit late? I mean, for goodness sake, we weren't in the army. When I was about 13, there was a fashion at school for lads to have black collared shirts. They looked really cool and somehow were permitted as part of our school uniform colours. Several of my mates had them. I was stuck with the standard white ones and I really wanted a black one. What was wrong with them? Why was he being such a grumpy, intransigent old bugger, not allowing me to have one? It's not fair. Why did he have such a short fuse over so many things? Why would he get so angry at things that didn't seem to me to be that important? Why, when he was not at work, did he want to spend so much of his time alone on his allotment or fishing? So antisocial. Why did he push me into taking the physics and chemistry subjects I was rubbish at? Why was maths seemingly so easy for him and something I really had to work at? I ended up with grade D O-level physics, grade 4 CSE chemistry, and by some miracle of effort, grade 1 CSE maths. Bit of a letdown all round, to be honest. And why, when we went on a big road trip to Europe when I was 11, why did he stick a compass on the dashboard of the car? I know this was pre-sat-nav, but what was wrong with reading road signs and an atlas, for goodness sake? Who on earth was this man? I just don't get him. Embarrassingly, I might come across a little bit like Harry Enfield's Kevin at this point. Oh well, the joys of teenagerhood. Dad died in 1996, aged 77. It was 1 week after my 35th birthday. To the end, I never really understood him or got close to him at all. I think I was in my early 50s when one evening I happened to be watching a documentary on TV about Oswald Mosley's fascists and the 1936 Battle of Cable Street. Seeing that film of Mosley leading a parade of black-shirted pro-Nazi thugs through London, a penny suddenly dropped. Dad would have been 17 at the time. Fascism would have been the complete antithesis of the person I think he was. Scroll forward to 1973 and his son asking to wear a black shirt to school. Suddenly, I got it. That shirt didn't simply represent a fashion trend to him. To have his son going to school wearing a black shirt, to be dressed as a British Nazi, never, ever, ever. No argument, no discussion, no. Sorry, Dad, I finally got that one. In 2025, I applied to the National Archives for a copy of my dad's war service record. 5 months later, the email with attached PDFs finally arrived. I knew Dad had been in the Navy during the war, joining up in 1940 at the age of 21. I knew he had served some time on a destroyer called HMS Antelope, that he saw service in the Mediterranean and the Malta convoys. I knew he'd been a wireless operator, and I knew he'd started his service on tugs, although I knew nothing else about his early service. His war service records gave me a wealth of information. Through the whole of 1941, it turns out, he served as an ordinary telegraphist on the ocean-going rescue tug HMS Mastodonte. I discovered Mastodonte had been a French rescue tug that had escaped to England before the fall of France. He served on the Mastodonte from January the 1st, 1941 until the 18th of December that year, sailing out from Greenock on the mouth of the River Clyde. I also noticed that he was registered as being on sick leave for the whole of May 1941. Online research led me to a book called The Tatty Lads, all about the rescue tug service. I ordered it and read it immediately. That gave me a much fuller insight into some of the horrors he is likely to have seen and what he must have gone through in 1941. It was really shocking. Further online research led me to discover a film called The Key from 1957, starring Trevor Howard, William Holden and Sophie Loren. The film is all based around the work of the rescue tugs in the North Atlantic in 1941. The fierce storms, the U-boats, the plane attacks, and the almost suicidal odds when going out time and time again to bring in crippled merchant ships from the convoy. It's a drama, but the fear and strain and dangers are very realistically portrayed. I had no idea Dad had been through all that at just 22 years old. It might be on one of the streaming services. It's well worth watching. Then I remembered an old letter from 2008 written to me by Dad's younger brother in reply to me asking him about Dad's younger years. I finally found the letter and one forgotten paragraph stood out to me. To quote Uncle Fred, "The all-time shock came during World War II when he spent 12 months on an ocean-going tug operating in the North Atlantic. Most of the crew were the dregs of Glasgow, and 4 hours on and 4 hours off for 2 weeks at a time was pretty unbearable. On leave, he was clearly in a psycho condition. His service in the Med on a destroyer allowed him to recover." So, after 4 months on service in the North Atlantic, in the depths of winter, Dad had had a breakdown of some sort. I'd had no idea. Living religiously by the clock for weeks on end. No wonder he was so fixed on our meal times. His nerves must have been shot to pieces at that time. Post-traumatic stress disorder was something we had never heard of in the 1970s. No wonder he often had such a short fuse. No wonder he preferred to spend time alone in peaceful isolation on his allotment. No wonder he stuck a compass on the dashboard of the car. He was a wireless operator. When on service, the job never stopped, apparently, constantly transmitting and receiving signals by Morse code. The levels of concentration required to keep this up for 4 hours at a time were apparently exhausting. Add to that the pitching, rolling North Atlantic, seasickness, a rough crew who he was probably quite isolated from, and the constant threat of U-boat attack. I've no idea how he got through that, or how many of us today would have coped. He later became a radio mechanic, then a leading radio mechanic, and by 1945 was based at a shore station, HMS Mercury, near Petersfield, Hampshire, writing operating manuals for new pieces of radar equipment. He wasn't finally demobbed until May 1946. No wonder he found maths, physics and chemistry apparently so straightforward and got frustrated with my inability to understand. Like many of his generation, he rarely spoke of his wartime experiences, except for the odd light-hearted moments. The information I've discovered recently has really made me reassess and reappraise the dad who died almost 30 years ago. Not the dad, but the person who finally became a father at the ripe old age of 42. Whilst writing this Sprucecast, one final memory came back to me from 1995. My son was born in February that year, and a few weeks later we took him down to Devon for him to meet his grandparents. I passed my son over to my dad and he held him on his lap. In that moment, a huge smile came over his face as he looked directly into his grandson's eyes, and a lightness seemed to come over him that I'd never seen before. It was as though all the strain and tension in him for a moment dropped away. His face looked completely joyous, and for a few brief minutes it was like looking at a completely different father. Finally being able to have a better understanding of someone, not as a parent, but as a person, has actually been very cathartic. I guess it's an understanding that, if it comes to us at all, it comes at different ages. This investigation has certainly answered a lot of questions for me, and has been a really valuable thing to have done. I only wish I could go for a pint with him now and have a proper adult-to-adult conversation. But then, if he was alive now, he'd be 107.
Sprucecasts, an eclectic collection of anecdotes, reflections and stories by Mark Spruce.